Your company will pay you the least amount of money that they possibly can to show up to work every day. And if you don't ask for more, they will never give it to you. You are what you negotiate and not a penny more.
In your opinion, what does it mean to be the most powerful woman in the room?
It means that you can walk into any room with the confidence and believe that you are meant to be there. And you're not looking around from right to left, wondering if everybody's judging you. You're confident in who you are.
This show is all about helping you up-level your life, including your well-being, your relationships, your mental health, your wealth, your confidence, and your joy. I challenge you to keep an open mind as together we discover tips, tools, and advice from the experts to help you live life to your fullest potential. Welcome to the Jenna Banks Show. Hello, thank you for joining us today. Today, my guest is Lydia Fenet. She is the founder and CEO of the Lydia Fenet Agency, which is a boutique agency representing best-in-class charity auctioneers. Over her 2-decade-long career, Lydia served as the global managing director of strategic partnerships for Christie's, has reshaped the fundraising landscape as the world's leading charity auctioneer, and has raised over $1 billion for nonprofits globally. Lydia is the author of 2 best-selling books, The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You, and Claim Your Confidence, as well as the podcast host of Claim Your Confidence in collaboration with Rockefeller Center. Lydia, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Jenna. I'm so excited too.
So I wanted to ask you, what, just because you've raised so much money for charity and you've had such an illustrious, long career in the business, I'd love to open up by asking you just a personal question that I have, which is, can you tell us maybe one of the moments where you've raised the most money on stage? I'm super curious. What was that? Was it something that you auctioned off, or was it just some generous donor giving money? What was that situation?
Well, there's an auction that takes place at the end of every January down in Naples, Florida, called the Naples Winter Wine Festival. And I think I started taking it about 10 years ago. And to really set the scene for you, I would say that you have to imagine that 600 people are standing outside of a tent, drinking wine, having hors d'oeuvre, just enjoying this beautiful sunny day in Florida in January. And all of a sudden, a marching band fires up. And that is what it takes to get everybody into the tent. So it really gets the energy excited. It really gets everybody there excited. And we go into the tent, and then over the next 4.5 hours, we raise, this year it was $33 million.
Wow.
I know. And it's all for charity. So I say to people, we're not selling art. We're not selling, incredibly like amazing furniture or jewelry or anything like that. These are experiences that people bid unbelievable amounts of money on, frankly, more than they really are worth, simply because they want to give money to the Naples Children and Education Foundation, which basically helps children in Naples, Florida thrive.
That's amazing. That is just amazing. I can't even imagine what it's like to raise that kind of money and the energy in the room and getting people to give at such a big level. I know you've impacted that greatly. I've read your book. It's just so impressive, this career that you've had. And you've really changed the landscape for a lot of auctioneers from what it sounds like. But, by the way, I just want to mention, y'all, this book, The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You, I was looking it up on Amazon, just wanted to see some of the reviews, and there are just so many, which is really hard to get as an author. So I can only imagine the thousands and thousands of books that have gotten out there in the past 3 years. But I don't know if you know this, Lydia, but your book is currently still a bestseller in the women and business books on Amazon. You're ranking number 44 in women and business, 3 years after being published. So congratulations.
You know what's funny? I've said this to people before, because as an author, as a Simon & Schuster author, you have access to an author's portal, which I didn't have my first book, but I do have in my second book. And because I'm a competitive person and I love sales, I'm sort of competitive with everyone, including myself, as it turns out. So I always look on that to see what's driving sales. And one thing I found is that when I speak in person, it drives sales of books. just one-on-one. I can see it week over week. And so I do a lot of speaking, as you can imagine. And one interesting thing about The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You is post-COVID, I found that this book really resonates with women, especially young women who lost their college years, who lost their early 20-year-old years in terms of their job, and they didn't go into offices. They don't really know how to work in an office. They don't really understand corporate culture, and they want to understand it. I know that there is a lot being said about people who are quiet quitting or people who are resistant to work, but that is not what I found. I find 20-year-old women reach out to me all the time, and they are living in New York and they're like, I'm in a one-bedroom apartment. I'm stuck here all the time because I work from home and I don't work in an office, and I'm craving connectivity. What do I do? And so that book really has found a new audience in this new generation, which is incredible to see. And, I often say it's evergreen. Like the lessons in that book don't go away. And so I still love it. I still read it sometimes. And I think especially the intro is as timely today as when I wrote it in 2018.
Absolutely. I love the title so very much. But honestly, everything that you talk about when it comes to selling yourself and advocating for yourself and negotiating all the things, it could be for men and women, honestly. Although I love that you get into some of the issues that plague us women in particular, which is why I wrote my book the way I did as well. It's for women because we have our own set of things that we have to deal with, social norms, social programming, et cetera, to overcome. So it's important to write for women in particular, just to help us overcome those things. But honestly, what you talk about, men and women can totally learn from.
Yeah, people say that to me a lot. I'm from four children. I have four kids in my family that I grew up in, and it's boy, girl, boy, girl. And I used to say that I grew up in this perfect microcosm of equality because my parents had so many kids and we were all so young and grouped together. It was sort of like we didn't have an option to not do what the other kids were doing. So
Yeah.
my brothers played soccer. My dad coached soccer. So I played soccer. I hated soccer. I never liked it, but it never mattered. I had to play because that's what we did. Tuesdays and Thursdays we did practice with dad, and then the weekends were for games. And so it was very much everything that we did. I was surrounded by guys on either side. Plus, I have a very strong willed younger sister. And so there was a lot of debate. There was a lot of just constant, one upping each other with humor to try to kind of get on top of the heap. And those lessons really stuck with me. And a lot of people have said to me that they read that book and they're like, this isn't just for women. And I was like, it's not. But I do think that women need to hear it more. I needed to hear it from my dad and my brothers. I needed to become fearless in the same room with men or women, because that ultimately is what has made me successful and has made me strong enough in those instances where I didn't feel comfortable to still walk into the room and feel like I could own it.
I love that so much. In fact, I'd love to ask you about the title. So, the most powerful woman in the room is you. In your opinion, what does it mean to be the most powerful woman in the room?
It means that you can walk into any room with the confidence and believe that you are meant to be there. And you're not looking around from right to left, wondering if everybody's judging you. You're confident in who you are, in what you've chosen to put on as armor, which is what I think of as clothing, in the way that you are going to articulate yourself and sell yourself. And I think that comes with time. I think that comes with experience. But if you have the basic knowledge of how to do it, that is ultimately helpful over the long run. I feel like I graduated from college and I was like, okay, so what do I do now? I grew up in Louisiana. A lot of my friends were getting married right after college. I wanted to move to New York. I didn't really think about having a job as a career. I really thought about his job as a way to sort of, do the things that I wanted to do. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wish someone had sat me down, as I said in a lesson in that book, the way that my friend Rob's mother did, and said, listen, you need to get good grades in high school so that you can get into a good college. And you need to get into a good college so that you can go to a good business school, because you need to support your family. And those things are really important. And I can't tell you a single female friend that I have who had that conversation with her parents. And
Wow.
ultimately, that may not be the path that you're on, but I think it's important that we have those conversations with young girls and women at those formative ages to make them think about, listen, if I want to have a career and this is going to be the way that my life is going to go, I need to start planning that now. And I need to really start thinking about how to follow through with that.
I love that you mentioned confidence. This reminds me of a story from my first my first situation going to get a job. I was like 14, and this was at Burger King. Okay, and I really wanted to get out of the house and earn my own money and have some independence. And yeah, I will say my father really helped me give me a real leg up in business. This was a real pivotal moment for me, actually, because I was nervous, didn't know what to do. I was underage. They weren't actually legally allowed to hire me, but I didn't know that at the time. I just knew that I wanted the job. And I was like, he was driving me to the interview and he said, I asked him, what do I do? He's like, oh, it's easy. You just look them in the eye. Do not break contact. Just confidently look them in the eye, shake their hand firmly. It's really important to have a firm handshake and introduce yourself confidently. Well, that I knew how to do, right? And then the rest of it will fall into place. And you know what? He was absolutely right. I ended up getting that first job and it made such an impression on me. I was like, I have a plan. I know what to do. If I go for an interview, this is what I do. And it worked for me every time. Now, of course, I honed my skills after that.
Added some things
Um,
to your resume after that.
but just having the initial like strategy
Yeah.
really helps give you that confidence, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No
So
question.
what would be your add-on to that? I'd be curious to know, like, what would you add to that? Like that initial, like, because I know you mentioned in your book, having that opening line.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that and maybe any other strategies for just getting in there and making that great first impression and make you feel confident to be able to just sell yourself the rest of whatever you're doing, whether it's an interview or being on stage or whatever it is?
Yeah. So in the first chapter, The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You, I was really trying to think of a way to bring people into my job, which is auctioneering, which is it's such a niche job. So few people have any understanding of the auction world. I certainly didn't before I started working in it. And I really wanted people to understand what it's like as a charity auctioneer when you're standing backstage and you're peering out from, the sort of the wings of stage to 1,000 people who are staring up at a movie, watching a mission movie about what the charity does. And then basically it's up to me with one sheet of paper to go out there and make somewhere between, 100,000 and $33 million in an afternoon. And so in those moments where we're scared, in those moments where we're fearful, in a moment of unknown, how do we get confident? And what I realized when I was writing the book is there's something that I started doing very early on in my auction career where I have a gavel and I bang it down 3 times very quickly. So anytime you ever see me anywhere in the world, I will have either a gavel or if I've forgotten it, it could be as recently I was at a hockey rink and didn't have one. So I used a hockey puck. I've used salt shakers, lipstick, like the goodie bag, Stoli vodka, like the mini vodka in a bag. Anything that has like an edge and I don't think will break on the podium and I bang it down 3 times. And what that does for me is it gives me this moment where I sort of transform from the person who's been seated at dinner to the person who's about to literally run a stage for 1,000 people and make them pay attention and make millions of dollars. And what I say after that moment where that gavel hits is that I have an opening line that I use every single time. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lydia Fenet. And then I fill in the blank with a joke. I fill in the blank with something that I've observed before I get there. But the point is that no matter what happens when that gavel hits, I know what's coming next. I know the words that are coming out of my mouth. And so when you go into a situation where you know that you're going to be nervous, the
Mm.
strike method, which is what I call it, is really about you finding the thing that is going to make you feel confident in who you are. Is it a mantra you say in your mind or even out loud right before you go on there? I have a friend who taps the bottom of a table 3 times before each really tricky Zoom call to say, here we go. I have a coaching client who I work with who found a red stone on a beach after reading The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You. And she's like, it's red. And I literally hold on to it like Dumbo's feather. I'm like literally grasping onto this thing. But then you have to line up the next line. Because if you are a talented public speaker or you are somebody who is doing a lot of presenting, one thing is for sure, you will get an adrenaline boost before you get up there. It's not scary. That's the energy that you want. You want to like harness that energy. You need that energy to really get in front of a crowd and be commanding and to be in charge. But once you start speaking, all of that energy starts to dissipate, right? So all those nerves, all that adrenaline starts to slowly recede. So what
Yeah.
you want to do is have that line in your mouth so that no matter what happens around you, the minute you start to speak, you're already going to be calmer just after that initial beginning. And that's really what the strike method is about. It's about empowering yourself to feel really confident going into that moment and then have everything lined up right afterwards. And that way you're already into it. And by the time you finished, all the adrenaline is gone. You're probably going to have to take a nap if it was a big stage. But that's really what the strike method is about.
I love that. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that so coming up with your own strike method, whether it's going in for an interview or giving a big presentation, just having that either that object that'll make you feel grounded or like you said that mantra that you state in your head or that opening line because yeah, you're right. Every time you go into any of those situations, there are going to be nerves. You are
Yes.
going to get an adrenaline rush. And I think it's important for everyone to understand that, right? It's not it's like I hear that from everybody who gets on stage, who's been speaking for years and years and years. Some of the biggest speakers and performers in the world, even actors, they will always get that nervous feeling, that adrenaline rush. So it never really goes away, right?
Right. And there's a great story that I love to tell about Bruce Springsteen and a guy. They were talking about public speaking, and they had this one guy who was like, every time I get on stage, I want to die. And the interviewer said to him, can you just roll that to the end of the tape? Like, what do you mean? What happens? He's like, oh my gosh, like my whole body starts shaking. I feel like my palms are sweaty, and I feel like, I'm kind of like a little bit loose and out there. And then he said to Bruce Springsteen, he's like, what do you love so much about being on stage? He's like, oh man, I love that feeling right before I get on stage. My palms are sweaty. I'm getting like that adrenaline. And you realize so much of it is mental and the way that you think about that nerve, that sort of adrenaline rush. If you think of it as something that's exciting and energy and something that you need, then it's going to be something that fuels you. If you think of it as something that's horrible and awful and terrifying, it's going to deplete you. So a lot
Absolutely.
of it is the mental shift too. But I will say, and Jenna, you know this as much as I do, there is nothing that is going to make you a good public speaker as much as speaking in public. So force yourself on that stage. If you absolutely hate it, let me encourage you to go to an improv class or a Toastmakers class or Toastmasters class or something like that, that will allow you to practice that. And in the meantime, stand up and talk any time you can, because the more you do it, the easier it gets. Like last 2 weeks ago, I had 6 auctions in a row. The first auction I got on stage, I had like that nervous excitement. By the sixth one, I was, arriving 5 minutes before and just picking up the microphone as I walked on stage. It's the same for all of us. The more you do it, the less the nerves come in, and the less the nerves come in, the stronger you are on stage.
Totally. And I want to add to that for me, Lydia, it was really helpful to reframe right away, like remind myself when I'm getting on stage or in front of a camera or doing a news interview or anything like that, where the nerves will come up because they will always come up, is take it off of you. Because I think what amplifies those nerves in the other direction, in the wrong direction, in the negative direction, and it can go there if you let it, is a mindset thing, as you pointed out, is that it's not about you. So in your case, you're raising charity for amazing causes. And for me, I'm almost always talking about something that is valuable to the audience. I'm helping the audience. I'm there to serve. And so right away, that reframe just redirects that amazing energy, which can really work to your benefit if you harness it in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Right? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And I would say, even take that one step further, that the audience always wants you to succeed. The audience is there for you to do a good job. Nobody wants to watch someone who's a bad public speaker. There's nothing
Right.
worse than sitting through someone who's boring or somebody who's stuttering the whole time. Like those are painful things for an audience to watch. So think about the fact that the audience is rooting you on. They're like, come on, do well, like entertain us, make this fun. And I think if you always think about it from that framework, it makes it easier to settle into being on stage. I love nothing more when I get on stage. People are expecting, I mean, look, nobody ever wants a charity auctioneer on stage because people are having fun and they're
Right.
drinking and they're having a good time. And like the auctioneer gets up there and is like, oh, I have like these 3 random lots to sell you. Does anyone want it? Everyone's like, please get off stage. Right. And so knowing that that's often what the case is, I'll usually start with a joke and I'll say something like, Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lydia Fenet. I'm your auctioneer this evening. I am so delighted to be here. And I can tell just by looking at your faces that none of you feel the same way. And
Oh,
everybody laughs, right? Because,
yeah.
right, nobody wants me on stage. I'm like, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be off the stage in 20 minutes and we're going to have a great time. How do you guys feel about that? And, there'll be a smattering of applause. I'm like, well, it's clear that you don't even care either way. So let's get going. It's just like, it doesn't bother me. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to have fun, as opposed to me standing up there and being very serious and very intentional, which isn't what charity auctioneering is about. And once I learned that lesson over the course of my career, I think I just became a much better auctioneer.
And this goes back to your book title, The Most Powerful Woman in the Room, which you talk about. You pull that phrase in so many different wonderful ways in the book. I love it so much, but it's true. Like on stage in that moment, you are the most powerful woman in the room, and you have to own that because you are setting the energy for the experience of the entire group. And I will add on to that, that I love how you talk about making it community. I
Yes.
think that's so important. I've learned that in my short years of speaking myself, is that when you make it about community, you are the most powerful woman in the room because you're leading that community, but it's not about you.
No, no, it's never about you. And even with auctioneering, people would always be like, oh, it's about, the amount. Because in art auctioneering, when people are sitting there waiting for you to sell them things that they want, it is really about the increments. It's about counting the numbers and keeping things very clear for the audience. But in charity auctioneering, it's about the people who are bidding. It's about the storytelling about what I'm seeing, about the lot that I'm selling. I'm selling this beautiful house in Aspen. How many people here are skiers? A quarter of the audience's hands raised. I'm like, okay, well, I better come up with a better sales pitch because only a quarter of the people can bid on this. I'm like, well, how many people love fall? And, we get more hands. And I'm like, how many people love spring? And I'm like, well, if you don't like spring, fall, or winter, I bet you like summer. And guess what? This house it's available year round, right? So all of a sudden, everyone in the audience is like, oh, I thought she was just offering a house in Aspen, which immediately people think skiing, right? So they're like, I don't ski. I'm too old. I got injured. I don't like skiing. What? But then all of a sudden, if you open it up to a breadth of possibilities, they'll think about it differently. And that's really what it's about. It's about them. They have to buy it. I'm the person selling it. So it's really, as you said, about them.
Yeah, and I love how you mentioned about the stories as well, which you just showed us how you would weave the selling in with the making it personal for the audience, as well as stories. You're creating a story around it, and people can envision themselves there in the summer or the spring or skiing or whatever. And so I love that you talk about stories in your book and how important that is, among other things, to being successful on stage, right?
But
And in
also
selling.
in selling in general. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really what it's about. It's about, as you said, somebody fitting into this story and this narrative that you're creating. Oftentimes if I'm talking about selling something in Mexico, my immediate thing is to say something like, do you guys know, I don't know if you know this or not, but next year in New York City, we are going to have 100 feet of snow, which of course is absurd. Of course, we're not going to have 100 feet of snow. But all of a sudden, everyone's like, oh, so I'm like, wouldn't it be great to have a trip to Mexico in your back pocket? Because it's hard to sell things during the summer where it's already warm, but that's not when you want to use a trip to Mexico, right? So that's what sales is about, right? It's about creating an opportunity for people to see something in a different way. And it doesn't matter what you're selling, you can do that with anything.
I love that so much. Okay, so I want to pivot a little bit to career because I just love your career trajectory so much. So I want to talk about money. You wrote in your book about how you were working hard, you worked crazy hours, put your head down, did the work, did it well, were acing your what do you call those annual check-ins or quarterly check-ins, progress check-in. What can you
Performance reviews.
performance reviews, that's it. And so, you just took what your employers gave you as far as promotions, raises, whatever, which wasn't much. And then things changed. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that trajectory changed? How you went from putting your head down, doing the work and hoping they notice you and give you the raise and the promotions, but just taking what you get, to doubling that, tripling that in a short amount of time? I'd love to hear that journey if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Of course. So I was 10 years into my career at Christie's. I had worked tirelessly, as you said. I mean, I ran the events department from the age of 26 to 30. I had been in it since I had graduated from college, essentially. And it was nonstop. I mean, we never left the building. I think we had 2 weeks of vacation, but I even remember thinking maybe I shouldn't take them, except for the fact that most of our clients were gone in August. But we worked pretty much 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And it was crazy. And I loved it. I mean, I should preface all of this by saying that that was the common theme through my time at Christie's. I loved everything I did, and I never cared that I was there during that time. And that was also part of the problem because I was always willing to do more. You know, it was like, well, could you do this? Can we throw this on your plate? And I was always like, yes, more, I'll do it all. And about 10 years into my career, I went out to brunch with a bunch of my friends. And in New York City, when I was in my 30s, there was this thing called the bottomless champagne brunch. And you would pay, a small amount of money for absolute 100% guaranteed hangover inducing champagne. I mean, I
I love it.
was spending $2 per bottle on this stuff. And we would sit there all afternoon. And so we'd been sitting there on one of those bottomless champagne brunches. And my friend said, you guys, I'm so excited. I just bought a 1-bedroom apartment. And I remember thinking to myself, wait, what? What? And, that was inside. On the outside, I was like, that's amazing. Oh, we should come over. We should have our book club there, and I'm just on the inside being eaten aside. I'm just being eaten alive, despite my 5 or 6 glasses of champagne that I probably had at that point. And I remember pulling her aside afterwards and saying, I'm so confused. I thought we all had these like sort of high glamour, low paying fashion events jobs. I don't understand. Like, how could you possibly have bought a 1-bedroom apartment? Like, did somebody help you? And she was like, what are you talking about? And I remember saying, like, how much do you make? And she told me, and it was so much more than I made. And we were doing the same job. And honestly, she was working a lot less than I was. And I was just like, wait, what? And, she had just grown up in a family where money was something that they talked about. And, her parents were definitely there being like, ask for more, ask for more. It was never a conversation in our house. It just
Wait,
wasn't.
can we? I want to highlight that for a second because I think this is huge and it doesn't get enough attention.
Yeah,
Have you found that women are reluctant to talk about money? Like, do you find that in your circles as well?
all the time, all the time.
Yeah.
I feel like it's getting better now. And I feel like Gen Z, because of social media, have a lot more exposure to different thought leaders about finance. But no, I mean, I would say that the one thing that was such a blessing in my life was that my mother taught me to watch the Today Show in the morning when I first woke up, because she kind of always had it on when she was getting ready in the morning to take us to school. And so I would put it on just kind of in the backdrop for the first like 10, 15 minutes as I was getting up. And then it would just kind of be on. And there's a woman named Suze Orman, who
Love
is
Susie.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's like the money queen of someone my age, much older than me, but just was kind of always in the background talking about money. And I was half listening for years. And the one thing that she kept saying, and it probably took me 10 times to hear it, was if you have a 401k that is matched by your company and you are not maxing it out, you are leaving money on the table. And I don't know why it took me as long as it did to hear it, but I remember sitting in one of the sort of 401k benefit forums that we had to be in at work one time. And someone said, and because we match 401ks, and I remember thinking, oh, that's what she was talking about. And so I said to the person, and I was making so little money at this point,
Yeah.
well, what do I have to do? She's like, well, just tell us how much you want to match because you have to put some in. And I remember being like, well, how about 1% of my salary? And then over the years, I increased it as I made more. And that money it was taken out of my paycheck. I never noticed it. And after 24 years, I mean, that money grows. And so if you are in your 20s or 30s or 40s and you are working for a company where you have a match of the 401k, just trust me when I say this, you cannot believe how much that money grows. And a very small amount in your 20s is a lot of money in your 40s. So just start chipping away at it. I don't care if it is like $5 a week. Just put it away, because if it's matched, and even if it's not, it compounds over time, and time is on your side. I am not a financial advisor, but I can tell you that that was one of those things that I look back and like, thank God I listened just at that one time. So
Great
just
advice.
to sort of like come full circle on that. As I said, I learned this from the Today Show. It wasn't something that my parents taught me about or talked about. And so after this brunch, I really started to do some digging, and I started asking around and finding out that I was in fact making a lot less than I was supposed to be making.
Wow.
And then I went to do an interview because then I got angry, which isn't that
Mm,
it's not something that I would ever want for anyone. And so this is why I think it's so important to have these conversations about finance upfront every year over year. I was angry, like very angry at this company because I thought in my 10 years of working there, because I had such strong relationships and I loved the man that I was working for at that point. I loved everyone I worked with and I loved my job. I thought that they were taking care of me the way you
yeah.
would a family member, because in my 10 years at Christie's, I had always thought that I was working for my family. And
Mm,
that is a mistake. And I can tell you that over a 2 decades long career at a company, your company will pay you the least amount of money that they possibly can to show up to work every day. And if you don't
mm,
ask for more, they will never give it to you. So don't be the starstruck 20 to 30-year-old that I was at that point, because that was 10 years of money. And we just talked about money compounding over time. 10 years of
yeah.
me asking, right?
I mean,
And
that may have cost you millions, like compound interest over time, just by not having gotten the raises that you could have gotten. And
exactly.
but again, as you point out in your book, it's not necessarily their responsibility, right? It's our responsibility
It's our
to negotiate.
responsibility to negotiate and to ask. And I will also say, on the flip side of that, if you were looking at a job description and you were doing everything on your job description that you have in front of you right now, that is what your paycheck is for, right? So if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in your job and nothing more, that is what you get paid to do. So I'm talking about the people who go above and beyond. But
Mm,
regardless of where you are in that spectrum, every year you should be asking, is there a chance for an increase? Is there something that I can take on for more? Like,
mm.
don't just continue taking more to take more. Everybody loves a person who puts their hand up, but people also take advantage of that. So
That's right.
just be aware that there's a balance between the two. You want to
Mm,
be somebody who shows up and says yes to things, but you also don't want to be the person who ultimately gets taken advantage of. So that's
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so Lydia, what did you do after you got mad, upset?
so after I got mad, I actually interviewed. I went to, just by chance, there was a job as the head of communications for the role of senior communications for Moet and Hennessy, which is basically the
Oh
parent
yeah.
company for every high-end champagne and liquor and spirits company that you can imagine. And I had a friend who basically put my name up, and so I went to meet with the head of this whole thing. And I remember we were in the conversation, and he said something along the lines of, well, talking about the person who was representing Veuve Clicquot. And I made a comment, kind of like an offside. I was like, well, does she get like a tiara and a pageant thing? Because he said like Miss Veuve Clicquot or something like that. I was like, does she get a tiara and a pageant sash? And he got quiet and he goes, well, she makes $400,000 a year. And I swear to God, Jenna, my jaw literally dropped. I was like, wait, what? I could not at that point, even I wasn't even making $100,000. That wasn't even close to that at this point. I
Wow.
was so far off of anything even in the realm of $100,000 after 10 years of my job. Like I just couldn't even fathom. And it just completely reframed my understanding of what a job could be and how
Hmm.
it could make. And again, the auction world and the wine and spirits world are totally separate. That is not an apples to apples comparison by any stretch of the imagination,
Sure.
but it did give me a sense of how far off I was in this job. So that really made me start looking around for the apples to apples comparisons. And that I realized really was, I was making a third of what I was supposed to make, a third.
Wow. Wow.
And so I essentially went in for my performance review. And as I said, one of the things about a performance review, and I knew this was like, I can say even when I finally left Christie's, I'd never had a single instance of being called into HR. I'd never had a complaint against me. I'd always received the highest marks on my performance reviews because I really cared and I really tried. And I had yet another great performance review with like not even a job increase to keep up with inflation at that point. And so I went into my
Mm.
boss's office, who I adored, and I remember I just said out loud, I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave because I have another job offer. And I didn't even have the job offer from Fluka. We weren't even into it.
That's
And when I
awesome.
went in there, I'm not even sure that I meant to say that. I just was so angry.
Mm,
And again, you don't want to be me in this situation because that can really backfire if it's not done in the right, in the
sure, sure.
I didn't really have a backup plan either. And I did know that it was the time of the year where he would be in a real pinch if I left. And I didn't really have anyone who was even close to my level at that point. And so he started scrambling immediately and he turned red and he was just like, what would it take to make you stay? And the other thing that I had done in this time period when I was realizing how little I was paid was I had mapped out my next step. So I knew that there was a place for a strategic partnerships department at Christie's. I knew that I should be the one who could run it. I knew the brand better than anyone. I'd been running events at that point or in the department for over 10 years, doing 500 events a year all over the world. And I pitched it to him on the spot. And he was like, yep, I can see this. I can see this. And, what would it take? And I basically gave him a number. And I said, and the final thing is I want an international title because I've already done this work all over the country and all over the world. So at the very least, that should be it. And sure enough, that afternoon, he called me back and he said, okay, so we're willing to give you everything you want. Why don't you come upstairs? And so I went upstairs.
Oh,
I was in absolute disbelief, Jenna, like
yeah,
absolute disbelief.
I can
I was
imagine.
like, this is what it takes. And I remember sitting across from him and he said, okay, so we can give you everything you want, but we can't give you the global title. So step one is that you do this. And then step two is that you get the global title. And at that point, I was like, I'm going to stay. Obviously, I have nowhere to go. But I still wanted to see if I could just get everything I wanted. And I said, no, I don't think you understand. There is no step two unless there is step one. And I pushed
Oh, ballsy.
and I remember he kind of groaned. And then by the time I got back to my desk, I had the global title too. So I had tripled my
Amazing.
salary. I had the global title and I had everything I wanted from that job, which kept me happy for years. And so again, don't use that tail as something that you want to do unless you know that you're in a place where you can really do it. But at the time, it was transformative for me and it taught me to always ask. No matter
Oh, yeah.
the answer was going to be no, and I knew I was walking into it, at least I wasn't scared to ask anymore. And that is the lesson of that chapter. You are what you negotiate and not a penny more.
Oh my gosh. So true. Lydia, can we talk about asking for what you want? I think this is really important because it sounds simple, right? Oh, sure, just ask for what you want. But again, I feel like as women, there's so much social conditioning around not being that person, just kind of taking what you get and being okay with it. Can we talk about that? Like, how important is asking for what you want?
It's the difference, as I said, between multiples of things. I mean, I have a friend who was early in at Google, and I will tell this tale for the rest of my life because when she told me, I've never stopped thinking about it. And she said after the first year at Google, everybody went in and they were sort of like, thank you so much for the bonus. Thank you so much for all these things. And a lot of the guys she worked with asked for equity to stay. And she just said, thank you. And as she always says, like, that's the difference between them never working again and me continuing to work.
Wow. You know what? This is such a I love that story so much. And just like if you think about all the times you can ask, right? Like you talk about being prepared for everything. I love how prepared you are. I feel like every time we're in a situation where we could ask, I feel like we should ask. We got to know what we want. I think that's really important. Like, okay, you're here, but where would you like to go? What are your goals? And then look for opportunities to be asking for what it is that you want. I mean, every little bit matters, right? For me, for example, if I'm at a restaurant and something comes out the way, in a way that I don't like, or it wasn't what I ordered, we can just accept it and be like, oh, I don't want to inconvenience anyone. Oh, I'll just take what I get, whatever. Or we can be in the habit of saying, you know what, no, this wasn't what I wanted, and asking for what you want. I feel like there's no small moment that you have to practice that muscle on a regular basis. What do you think about that?
I absolutely agree. And I also think, to the point of sending food back in a restaurant, the other thing is you don't have to be, you don't have to be a different person to negotiate with people. I always say that on stage, charm for me is half of my power on stage, because I say things with everything with a smile, and I make a joke out of it, and I make it light and fun. And so if something comes out at a restaurant that you don't like, you don't have to be like, can you take this back? This is terrible. If
Yeah, you don't
that's
have to
the
be a mean
case,
person all of a sudden. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. You're like, this just happened to me last week. The chicken came out. I'd had a couple of bites, and I said to the gentleman, I was like, I have to be honest. This is a little chewy for my taste. I was like, do you think you could throw this back on the grill for me? He was like, yeah, no problem. What about that
Yeah.
is offensive? Otherwise, I was eating raw
Nothing.
chicken, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's the same thing when you go into a negotiation. Go in as yourself. I remember saying to one of my bosses at Christie's many years ago, when I was going in for yet another conversation about comp, which you do every year there, I said, well, I guess you know why I'm here, because I'm about to ask for something. And I was like, and you should get used to it. I think it was his first year as my boss. I was like, because you're going to get it every year. And he just laughed. And, I don't even think that year I got an increase in salary. I think we'd had a down year that year, but he knew. And the next year he's like, well, I know what you're coming for. I was like, yeah, you do. Whatever you say, I'm probably going to ask for more. In fact, I know I'm going to ask for more because I know how important it is. And if nothing else, it set him up for knowing that he would have to either, knock me down from it, which that's on him, or the second part of that, or the opposite. I might get it, and that's exciting too.
I love that. Yeah. Asking for what you want is you just have to be in that habit. And once you are, man, sky's the limit. You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
I always say you get 100% of what you don't ask for.
Right.
So
Exactly.
it can't hurt to ask, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just makes such a difference. And like you mentioned, I love that you mentioned, even nicely just sending back the food or, but bringing the person who's helping you into the conversation, because it is about community. I love how you mentioned that, like where you're talking or whether you're in an interview or whatever, it's not just you,
Right.
you're not on an island. And so, part of selling and part of speaking and all of that is about creating this community, really. And people want you to be happy, especially if you're, getting dinner, for example, and you're not happy. They want you happy. So they want you to ask, but you don't have to be mean about it. So like, I think it's one thing to ask and come at people like aggressive. I hear this a lot with women who are trying to make it in these male dominated spaces. I hear this a lot, Lydia, like, I get accused of being aggressive or assertive, and they're just trying to, get along in a man's world and get a leg up in a male dominated space. But I think that approach is super important. You get more bees with honey, like my grandmother used to say.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like just the softer approach. It's not about playing small. It's not about having to be demure or anything like that. But it's just about like, just if you come at someone harshly or angry, it's going to put someone on the defensive, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you real quick before we get off the subject of your negotiating that situation. How important do you feel like it is for us to be willing to leave? Because I know you said you were willing to leave and you made it seem like you had that job and that just kind of came out. You weren't intending to do that, but it happened. And thank goodness, because that probably gave you a lot of negotiating power. I personally feel like you do need to be willing to walk away, or at least have the energy of that. And I've seen that time and time again in all the stories I've heard where women made a massive change in their career trajectory, got massive pay raises, massive promotions. It was because they were willing to walk away. And how important do you think that is in negotiating?
I mean, I think it's very important, especially in this day and age, in the current job community and environment that we're in. I do think it's important that you have the ability to do that if you want. There's nothing more impressive than having an offer letter in front of you, and that's really what you want. Period. End of sentence. I think more so than anything, it gives you the confidence to negotiate in a way that is going to be authentic and not to be scared that you don't have anything on the back end. I truly think that if at the end of the day you lose the job that you're in to go to another job, then you were meant to walk.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, either the value wasn't there for them, it's not the right fit, it's time for you to move on, which oftentimes leaving to go to that next job that you have lined up is what we need to keep going in our career. We can't, it's nice. It feels good to say that, oh, I love my company, love my job. I'm just going to stick around and take what I can get. But that is not going to serve your career well. And sometimes it does mean we have to leave to make that leap in our pay level, for example, because once you get to a certain level, I highly doubt you're going to want to go backwards after that, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Lydia, I love this conversation so much. I had like a million more questions for you, but we ran out of time. But before we leave the audience today, are there any final words that you would like to share with us? Any last words of wisdom?
I would just say to anyone out there who's suffering with, the feeling that you're not doing enough or being enough or getting everything done that you want to get done in your life, you're the only person who is going to change anything in your life. So don't wait around for other people to make decisions for you. Don't wait around for other people to have opinions about you. Just live the life you want to live, because it really is the best way to show up for yourself in your own life.
I love that so much. And definitely go check out Lydia's book. The first one she wrote, again, is The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You. I love this book so much. The other one is called Claim Your Confidence, right, Lydia?
Yeah, exactly. Claim your confidence. Same as the podcast. So,
And that was her newest book as well. So definitely check out Lydia's books. Lydia, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you being here.
oh my gosh, it was such a pleasure, Jenna. Thank you for having me on your show. I was so honored to be asked.